What's up, everybody? James Duggan. Joining me is Alanah Pierce. We are here to discuss the much-loved Metal Gear Survive. We got some hands-on time with the preview event, of course, sarcasm there. And I kind of went into this without a ton of bias. I've played Metal Gear 5. I don't have as much experience with the series as a lot of other folks, but I do have a ton of time spent in early access survival and horde shooters, which there are a lot of parallels drawn. And I have to say, I was not impressed by any angle. What about you?
Well, I didn't think that it was terrible. I didn't think it was the worst thing that I'd ever played, but the thing is, so the co-op is pretty much entirely horde mode, but it doesn't do it as well as other things that have horde modes. And then the survival elements, some of them I think are really interesting. Like when I was trying to find a specific resource, my hunger and my thirst were both going down, so there's a lot of things to manage, and I found that compelling, but I also don't think it does that as well as games like Ark, so sort of what's the point?
Yeah, and I do think like hunger and thirst are one of those things that are so tedious in so many regards that the question is like, what is the gameplay we're trying to get out of here? I think when I actually think about like the best survival experience, it's gonna sound weird, but like the first night in Minecraft, just trying to get enough to build a hut, and not die to zombies the first night, and there's this really cool rush. I didn't really get any of that in this game. It kind of missed the mark for me in terms of survival, and it missed the mark for me in terms of combat. I think the thing that hopefully some of us can agree on is that Metal Gear Solid 5 doesn't do particularly well once you go loud. I think the stealth gameplay is fantastic, but I think here it's just, you know, these zombies are coming at you, for lack of a better word. Crystal zombies are coming at you, and you're attacking them, and they're doing these moves that you kind of have to dodge, roll out of the way of, which is not a very, it's kind of a clunky experience in Metal Gear Survive.
Well, it's also clunky in that there are ways to cheat them really easily. Like you can build fences while you're playing. Building is very quick. It's really just tap L1 and then place them down. But you can place them so far apart that there is clearly a gap that a zombie could get through, but they're not smart enough to do that. Also, if you're on a box or you're on a ledge, you can just stab them with a stick and they will eventually die. And there is weapon durability, so you can't do that forever, but the combat, I think the enemies are largely uninteresting and very easy to exploit.
Yeah, and we only saw two different kinds. We saw the regular zombie, and then there's this kind of exploding giant tank thing.
Which is slightly more interesting from a team perspective, to be like, hey, distract this while I try and get behind it. I also, one thing is, I did like that when you're exploring the open world, you don't know exactly where you are, so you kind of have to figure out your location via triangulation. And there's also this mist, which you need to approach differently to everything else. So the environment throws some stuff at you, but it's also kind of ugly and a little bit
It's not a great looking game.
Yeah.
In the open areas, you have an okay sense of where you are. When you put on your oxygen mask and go into the mist, which I thought was the most compelling thing, it's kind of like going to the dark zone in the Division. I got some Silent Hill vibes just because it's so thick, the mist. But you also can no longer see waypoints, and you can no longer see where you are on the minimap. So you just have to try and triangulate, like you were saying, based upon your surroundings. The combat I felt was it leaned very heavily on melee. We were playing early game. I ended up getting a bow and arrow as well as a gun. It was very difficult to find crafting materials for ammo, which I was like, ugh. But the bow and arrow was fun. However, there was a weird thing where like the arrows were not going where they were based upon the crosshair. I had to kind of account for the fact that the crosshair was slightly misaligned, and that's the kind of stuff when I talk about that I don't think Metal Gear, that engine does particularly well with like big action scenes.
The stealth in this is also pretty weird. There's a little circle around you that tells you when you've been noticed, but it seems like enemies just kind of notice you out of nowhere. But I do think if this is someone's first survival game, that they will probably enjoy. Like for a campaign that's supposed to be around 20 hours long single player, you do need to be online for the whole thing, should be mentioned. I think people could easily spend that amount of time just like watching the micromanagement aspects of it, and they could do that if it's your first survival game. You don't have a really great one to compare it to. As a Metal Gear game, I don't think Metal Gear fans are going to get anything out of it, ultimately.
Sure. I thought it was like a polished survival experience relative to the kind of stuff that you see on Steam Early Access, but it's still super tedious. Like, you're managing your health, you're managing your stamina, you have these status effects that you'll just get randomly from drinking dirty water or getting hit by an enemy and you'll just be bleeding, and the way that you cure that is by opening up a menu, and a lot of like the micromanagement has you opening up a menu in the middle of combat, which doesn't pause the game. But the one thing I will say that I did enjoy, purely for the sense that there are other people there and the potential to have fun, I think is pretty high, is co-op. The co-op load zone was
a lot
probably
of fun.
Like the most fun part of the game, strangely.
It's like almost like the PUBG starting area where everyone's just attacking each other, and it was like weirdly very fun when you're just putting fences down everywhere to block people in like that. It was surprisingly fun.
The actual mission was very like vertical RPG progression. We were fighting like these level 10 zombies, and we just didn't really have the means to kill them. And as a result, I imagine you get more geared, and there's kind of an RPG thing going on. But the thing that I think this game has a chance for succeeding is in kind of a long-term games as a service. They said there's going to be live events. The best gear will come from multiplayer. I think it could have a small but dedicated fan base, just that is interesting, kind of like an MMO grindy angle of it, and getting aligned with their friends. But yeah. Closing thoughts?
Well, I ultimately think that there is a market for this. I don't think it's a terrible game, despite people expecting that. And I, like you, tried to go in without any bias, and ultimately still feel like I came out with exactly what I expected. Something that is fine, that's probably not for a lot of people, that definitely isn't Metal Gear, and for someone who wants Metal Gear is probably going to be disappointed. There are very, very few references to even Metal Gear, but it's not the worst thing ever. So.
Sure. I think that's a pretty objective, fair read, and I have to say I agree. I think I maybe disliked it a little bit more, but I think we are generally in the same space. But anyway, for all things Metal Gear Survive, as well as Metal Gear in general, keep it right here on IGN.